Welcome to a special edition of the Animal Free Labcast, everybody. I'm back again today with Dr. Gemma Davis. Hey, Gemma, how are you?
Hi, Carla. I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. What are we doing today? Why are we here? And who's this Aaron in the corner?
Well, we've got a very special episode today, all about the government's strategy on phasing out animal testing faster, which was published on Tuesday. So we're going to be joined by our Public Affairs Manager, Aaron Davidson, and he's going to give listeners the full scoop.
Excellent. Promise no doors will be falling on me this time.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Other accidents may happen, though. Before we get into it, shall we just do the results of last week's poll questions? Because we've got those already, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. The question was, will animal testing end sooner if MPs act rather than waiting for animal researchers to retire? Yes or no? So the results were 98.5% of people said yes. So 1.5% of people disagreed. So
okay. So everyone thinking MPs need to act.
Yep, exactly.
Well, that's the
and
perfect.
We'll hear all about that from Aaron today.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Everyone, we're doing this special episode, as Gemma said, because the government published its strategy earlier this week on Tuesday. So the top line is, it is a really significant step forward in recognising that the future of science must be animal free, which is obviously what we've been campaigning for and working towards for years. There are lots of positive sounding measures, and I think they've done a good job of addressing many of the hurdles that still exist for researchers and companies wanting to adopt animal-free human-specific research. And I would definitely say there's a very clear shift in tone towards replacement. And that's important because the government enshrined within law is these 3 R's that you might have heard us talk about a lot. So the 3 R's are refinement of animal experiments, so it means animal experiments still go on, just refined a bit. Reduction of animal experiments, and then replacement. So we're all about replacement here. There is a definite shift in tone towards replacement becoming the most priority area, which is great, and definitely a lot more around alternative methods. Reduction and refinement are kind of definitely now in the past, I would say. Not gone forever, but they're much given much less of a priority, which is really good news. So I think overall, top line, big picture, all the work that we've been doing for over many years and work, from MPs and our colleagues in the sector, all of that has led up to this strategy being published. And yes, it is not everything we want, and we're going to get into some of that in a minute, but it is so much better than anything that we have had before. And I just want to take a minute just at the start of the episode just to say that all of us can feel proud of that. And there's not very often that we get to say that. Like, this is a minute just to take a step back and to reflect and say, well, we've done a good job here. Together, we have changed the world for the better, and we've made a real difference for animals, for patients, and for science. That is not to say it's perfect. It isn't perfect. Okay, so they have not gone as far as putting in Herbie's law. It would be far stronger if it was underpinned by a clear timeline, by firm targets and binding legislation like Herbie's law, because that will provide a framework to finally phase out animal experiments over the next decade. And it will mean that successive governments can't just abandon these commitments, they have to do them. Some of the pledges are a little bit woolly, so instead of clear commitments, the strategy says things like, we'll aim to, and where possible, where feasible. So the devil is going to be in the detail of how this is implemented. Without clear dates and enforceable targets, what we've been saying all along is that it's half a plan. In business, in the charity sector, in anything, you have to have a deadline, something for people to work towards if you want to make real difference. And so it's still lacking that. There are some kind of timelines, and we'll get into that, but there isn't an overall one. But that said, lots of positive measures in the strategy, which we've been calling for a long time. So a moment of kind of just pausing and saying thank you to everybody for, playing your part and helping to make this happen. This couldn't have happened without everybody really being involved. Okay, right. Well, let's get into the weeds of it a little bit then. So Gemma, looking at it from the science perspective, Aaron, looking at it from our public affairs perspective, what do you think? Is this a cause for celebration? Gemma, you go first.
I think so. There is a lot of positivity. And like you say, the fact that this even exists is huge because we had nothing before. So there is a lot that can be taken from it. There is a lot of detail in it. They've clearly put a lot of thought into it, spoken with the right people, tried to make it quite realistic. But we do have some concerns around the funding behind it. They've only put just under £76 million towards this over 5 years. And there's a lot in there that is going to be very expensive to actually implement. So it'll be interesting to see the real breakdown of how that money gets spent and on what is prioritised. And we also have a few kind of concerns about the things that they have put specific dates on. So like you said, they haven't put an overall timeline for kind of phasing out all animal testing, but some specific tests they have put in particular years that they want to finish it by or aim to finish it by. It's that woolly language, kind of non-committal. And unfortunately, some of those tests are ones that they are the low-hanging fruit, as I call it, is kind of they're ones that weren't used very often. We do have alternatives that are already available to replace them. So it's not going to end up being those big wins that we need to see reducing experiments like thousands or replacing thousands of animals. It's going to be small numbers, which while it is progress, it's not as much as we need and not as far as we need to go. So still work to do there.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, what do you think? Cause of celebration?
I think we have come a very long way. If we cast our minds back, the government was elected on the manifesto commitment to work towards phasing out animal testing and working with industry and civil society on that. So from there to actually have a plan which is 70 pages long, while it's not going to have everything we want in there, it's a really good starting point, and it's a point that we can then take further. And this honestly wouldn't be possible without all of you getting in touch. I know sometimes it can feel like you're getting in touch with the MP, and it's a bit of a battle sometimes, backwards and forwards, but it actually has made the difference and put these timelines in there. Nothing happens by accident. This has all made a difference. It's a huge step forward for the campaign. Obviously, it's not everything we want, but it's a good step in the right direction. It's good to put it in context of wider actions around the world. The US and the FDA in the US come out with their own plan to make animal testing the exception, not the norm, over the short term. So obviously, it's not as ambitious as the US is doing, but it's definitely a good step forward and lots to build on. I think that's what we should view it as. It's a good starting point, a starter for 10, but plenty more for us all to campaign on to push further into and to widen.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's talk about the good bits, because it's very easy to jump into the bad bits, but there is lots in there that sounds good. So, Gemma, what do you think are the kind of some of the highlights for you, some of the things you're really pleased to see in there?
Yeah, so I think they have committed to kind of building a couple, and we don't know if they're going to be physical or kind of virtual institutes, but they've laid out some plans to put together what they're calling a preclinical translational model hub, which will bring together things like AI, cell culture and engineering, genomics technologies, different disease modelling capabilities, to really kind of create a pipeline of translational medicine models. So this will take, the research that's being done into labs right through to the clinic to help patients. So that sounds like a really positive opportunity, absolutely the right thing to be investing in. So we'll be interested to see what that actually looks like, because one of the things that they called out in the strategy is that they want to increase productivity while wasting fewer resources, which absolutely is the right thing to be focusing on. So let's see what happens with that. The other thing they're going to establish is what they're calling the UK Centre for the Validation of Alternative Methods, abbreviation UKCVAM.
UKVAM. I'd go for UKVAM.
UKVAM?
In
like that,
in Europe, we call it ECVAM. So
yeah.
So
UKVAM? Yeah.
UKVAM.
And that one is going to act as a bridge between the lab and regulatory acceptance. So this is a really important area. We've talked about this lots of times before, how a lot of animal experiments are just done to fulfill regulatory requirements, but they're not legally required. So changing those regulations, making what's being done in the labs actually accepted by regulators is a really important part. And they're also going to work to harmonise with international regulators to make sure that what we're doing is accepted by the other countries and things aren't getting repeated.
And that one really is because of Brexit, isn't it? Because before we would have been kind of, when we were in Europe, ECVAM exists, which is the European Commission's version of this. And so it's kind of a post-Brexit measure, really, something that you would expect for us to be doing. And other countries around the world have got them. So there's a US version, there's a Japanese version, things. So yeah, this is a good one.
Kind of catching up with everyone else and kind of like they love this word harmonizing, making everything the same. Which
it's that, but that is important because it's a globalized industry, and pharmaceutical companies aren't going to be able to meet loads and loads of different requirements. That just makes everything very clunky. So yeah,
exactly.
it's an important measure.
Streamlining, really important. I think some of the other bits I thought were really interesting is they've said they're going to provide foundational training for early career researchers and PhD students to try and create this generational shift to recognise and deliver these replacements in future. So I think, as we talked about last time, our poll question, everything links together. This is a really important area. And by training these young researchers in these methods as they're starting out, that's how you're going to start that kind of real mindset change. So that's really good.
Absolutely.
And one of the other things...
sorry, Gemma, I did notice in there that and correct me if I'm wrong, but that is going to be 3 hours training, not 1 hour training.
That's
so
right. Yeah.
That'd be something we can try and find out a little bit more about, and
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully the emphasis will still be on replacement. But we'll see, because we don't know who's going to be delivering that training, what that is going to look like in practice. So we'll see on that one. But the other thing I think is really good, there's loads of different points. I could talk about this all day. Like I said, it's 64 pages long.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
But I think one of the things they're going to do is work with journals to reduce bias against publishing research using alternative methods. So this is going to be a really difficult one to actually implement, because a lot of that is going to be based on the editor's opinions. It's going to be a difficult one to kind of...
This is one about the retiring, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because if people who are reviewing the submissions are well versed in animal-free technologies, then they're obviously going to be more willing to accept it than someone who's never used that or doesn't really believe in it. So that's going to be a really, really important win if that happens, because that will have a massive impact on the whole research industry. So fingers crossed.
Certainly on the academic side.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've been involved in and working towards for a long while. So really good to see the government take that up. Yeah. Okay. Well, what about you, Aaron? What do you see as the good bits?
What I took out of it actually was more of the general tone of the document. From reading the document, and there is mounts of pages, and I wouldn't encourage all of our listeners to spend their time reading it, because I think there's other things you could do than read the document. It's interesting, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. The tone of the overall document was that the future is animal free, and the future is these human specific technologies. There is dedicated funding in there for stuff like organs on a chip. So I know that we support our researchers to develop as well. So that's really good to see, and it's clear that that is the future and that is the way forward. And stuff like having a clear intent and signal is very important, because it gives industry and it gives the politicians a clear understanding of what is available and what is the future and what we're aiming towards. I know we're going to touch on in a second about sort of what we've been calling for and stuff like that. But it is good that there are some, while there's no overall deadline or target, there's 3 baskets of tests. I know we'll touch on more details, and Gemma will explain more, but there are 3 baskets of sort of short, medium and long-term tests to be phased out. I know that the wording is a bit loose, and we would like that to be underpinned by legislation. But it's a good first step to have that conversation, to have that discussion, because it gives us a chance to highlight it with politicians and provide the evidence needed that we can actually end those tests now. And some of those tests, which we'll chat about in a minute, we have been calling for a long time. So it is really good to see that referenced in the strategy. And it just gives, it's credit for everyone for pushing for it for all these years, have this document. Part of the strategy as well, they're going to restart the public attitude survey to animal research. That will be interesting, because that was something that was actually postponed during the pandemic, if you cast your minds back all those years ago, and has not been restarted. And that will be, again, another interesting point to widen people's attention to this matter.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, that will save us from doing it, maybe. Okay, so let's get into how it reflects what we've been calling for over the years. Aaron, you just touched on that. So what are the key points that, we wanted and we got?
Yes, some of the key points we have been raising, with our politicians have also been raising in our behalf, is tests like the forced swim test. We raised that there was 250 procedures in the annual stats, and we raised that should be ended as soon as possible, because it's an archaic test. And in the actual report, it says that it should not be used for testing depression. So the report actually acknowledges that it shouldn't be used. So that is a partial win, because the government have put it in one of their buckets to phase out. They are going to end it by the end of the Parliament, which is 2029. Obviously, that's not soon enough.
No.
We are calling for that to end now, but it is a partial win because we have been raising this test for a long time, and it's good to see that there is a timeline. While it's not strong enough and it's not soon enough, it should be stopped today. It's not justified, but that is a partial win for us on that.
So before we get into the next one, Aaron, just for people at home, Gemma, just remind us in the briefest and least distressing way what the forced swim test is, just for context.
Yeah, so this is a really controversial one. It was a test developed in the sort of late 70s. It's been going on for such a long time, but it's basically an animal like a mouse or a rat is put into a sort of vessel of water that they're not able to escape from. And the whole test is just measuring how long it takes that animal to essentially give up and stop swimming. And that is meant to somehow model depression or mental health disorders in people. And, there's so many variables with that. It can be to do with the temperature of the water or how many times the animal's been exposed to that test. And there's so many different things that can affect the outcome without even being able to get any sort of verbal answer from the animal. There's so many ways that this just does not relate to what happens in humans. But then to take that a step further, it's used to test antidepressants. So a drug will be given to that animal to see if they then end up swimming for longer because they've had the drug. It's one of those, everybody, you hear that and you think that just doesn't sound like good science.
No, not to mention the distress for the poor animals. I mean, it is anyway,
exactly
horrendous.
Yeah.
So we are seeing a partial phase out of that by 2029. So
that's what's in the bucket.
Yeah, they said there's only 3 active licenses in the UK, so it's small numbers again, but it's an important one because everybody can understand how that's not going to translate into a benefit for a patient.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Aaron, what's the next one? What that we've been calling on and that we've got, or at least in part?
Yeah, the next one that we've got is actually quite an important one. So for a long time, we've been calling for a dedicated minister for responsibility for this subject area. So for far too long, as listeners will know, this issue's been siloed under a different Home Office, under the Department for Science, and DEFRA, under the Department of Health. So different parts of animal testing has been covered by different departments, so no one's looking at it in the round. And this is such a key issue because people don't look at it as one subject. So going forward, as a next step from the strategy, Lord Valence, the Science Minister, is going to chair a committee that's going to bring in other government departments and regulators to discuss implementation, actually take this forward. That's a big win for us because it's something we have been calling for a long time. And it's really good that they're going to look at the whole scope, whether it's licensing, whether it is funding the alternatives. They'll look at everything in the round. And it's something that we will be pushing to influence from and encouraging our politicians and parliamentarians to engage with the process as well to make it constructive. Because the strategy is a good document, it's a good step forward, but we need to see it implemented. And that will be something that we'll be pushing for as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing I'm just going to cover before handing over to Gemma, just further measures. So just before summer, we did an initiative with the APPG on phasing out animal experiments medical research, which is the APPG that we provide secretariat support. So as part of that, we had sort of 3 wishes for the strategy, 3 top things that we wanted from the strategy. So the first one was Herbie's Law, which is obviously the overarching target. So while we haven't got the overarching target, it's good to see that there are some initial targets. It's a good starter. One of the other targets was a ban on issuing licenses for experiments on non-human primates and dogs. Now, while the strategy doesn't have that, there are some tests that will reduce the number of dogs and non-human primates in over the next coming years, and there are some tests that should see the numbers come down on. So that is a good win there. So there are some elements on there.
They've even put a target on that, haven't they? Is it like reduced by 35% or something?
35%.
Yeah, so it's not gone as far as we wanted, but they don't know where they've come up with 35% from, but that's quite specific.
It's not, and it's something that we will be picking up and our parliamentarians will be focusing on, that, that is, while you've started it, you should just ban the use of them all because they aren't justified, and the tests they aren't justified are, and they shouldn't be used in those situations. The other point is the APPG called for a overall review of the licensing of animal experiments to ensure that the basically requirements to use to use on animals where possible are being enforced. Now, the strategy does, as somebody will touch on a bit later, does say that they will consider implementation of the rule report by the end of 2026. So just to cast your minds back, this was a report in 2023 conducted by Dr. Francis Rule from the government's own National Centre for NC3RS, National Centre for the Replacement and Reduction of Animals, that highlighted some severe failings in the animal licensing regime, and recommended 12 recommendations for the government to implement. So it is good to see that the government are going to move towards implementation of the recommendations by the end of 2026. So that's a win for us because we have been highlighting the huge failures in the licensing regime. We are obviously going to be calling for that to be implemented a lot quicker and to make sure the government does implement all 12 recommendations, which will make a difference in the licensing and enforcing the law as it is.
So we've got an episode where we talk about the Raw report, which people can go back and listen to if they'd like to hear more. Okay, so what's missing then, Gemma? What are the things that aren't in there? Obviously, there's the overall goal to phase out animal testing by a particular date. That's not in there. What else?
There's some gaps around kind of certain tests that we would have expected to have something mentioned about. So things like the LD50, LC50. So just for some background on those, it's that's when an animal, a population of animals is fed a substance or a new drug to an amount where half the population die. Is one of the only tests where the actual endpoint is death.
They're basically
which is
poisoned to death, aren't they? 50% of them.
Exactly. It's trying to figure out how much of this you could take before it kills you. And there's no mention of actually replacing that. It is mentioned in the document, but there is actually nothing about replacing that particular test. It's just mentioned that it is a thing in a context. So that's quite disappointing. And again, as Aaron mentioned, the 4-swim test, we were sort of hoping that there would be something more solid around that rather than just aiming to end it by the end of this parliament. There are some things in there, as I sort of mentioned earlier, that we have kind of called out. They've kind of put in as a quick win. You know, there's some things that have deadlines on them. So there's one test that says it's going to end by the end of 2025. So you think, oh, brilliant, you know, we're in November. That's going to end by the end of the year. And that is the rabbit pyrogen test. So for some background on that one, when a drug that is given through an injection, like a vaccine or antibiotics or an infusion, that sort of thing, those medicines are tested to make sure that they're safe because they can be contaminated or infected and can cause a lot of problems. And what happens is the drug is injected into a rabbit and their body temperature is monitored. And if that rabbit then develops a fever, which is caused by these pyrogens, then it's thought that that medicine is infected and it won't be safe. But there are alternatives to this. So,
and that's batch testing as well, isn't it? It's done on every single batch of a particular thing.
That's it.
They're pretty bad.
It's safety testing. Before it can be given to a person. So there's an alternative to that. It's been used for quite a few years. It's called the in vitro monocyte activation test, which uses human blood cells to mimic the human immune response to these pyrogens. And because of that alternative, this test hasn't actually been used according to the most recent annual stats since 2018.
Right.
So even though they're saying that this won't be used in future, it also hasn't already been used since 2018. So even though that sounds like a win on paper, it's not really
it's an easy
anything.
Win.
It's not going to make a difference. Yeah, it's an easy
Good to
win.
get a ban,
it's a low-hanging fruit to say, look, we're banning this by the end of the year. That actually wasn't being used anyway.
Yeah.
And there's some other examples of that. Things like you might have come across sort of back from when cosmetic testing was done on animals in the UK, skin sensitization and skin and eye irritation studies. Again, they said that they're going to end those by the end of 2026. Now, because of the alternatives that are available for those, these only make up a very, very small proportion of tests that are done every year. And in 2024, they made up less than 0.1% of all the regulatory procedures that were carried out in Britain. So again, that's a really small percentage. It sounds like a quick win. It sounds great. You know, we're banning 3 different tests. But actually, when you look at the numbers and how much impact that's going to make, it's really, really small.
Oh, well, and given the alternatives, they shouldn't really be doing them anyway, surely. So
exactly. Yeah. And all the ones that they have put deadlines on are regulatory tests. So the majority of animal experiments are carried out for basic and applied research in universities and things like that, which have no regulatory requirement or law. So that's what we need to really impact, because that's where the big numbers are. That's where things need to be changed. So it's this training for early career researchers and PhD students. That's where that's going to have a massive impact. And we should start seeing some changes come through there.
Brilliant. All right. Well, so Aaron, what are the next steps for us and for the government? What happens now?
So the next step is to make sure that the positive commitments that Gemma's referenced earlier about the setup of the new translational hub and stuff and the individual tests, to make sure that's placed on a statutory footing so it can't be unpicked and it's actually delivered. Because at the moment, the end of tests, for example, and the targets are just warm words and they are ambitions, but there's nothing underpinning that. So the next step is the government needs to make sure that there is actually some backing and some robust, whether it's by primary legislation or in other means or secondary legislation. So we'll be working with our parliamentarians to call for that, and we'll be working with the APPG for phasing out animal experiments medical research to shine a light on it. And we'll also be holding in the coming weeks and months, we'll be holding sort of workshops on different measures in the plan to really pick it apart, because it is very detailed. So we'll be doing that with the APPG and the APPG chair and officers to really highlight this and interact with government. And we will also be responding from the APPG in full to the strategy and taking it forward. But the government needs to start the ball rolling on this, get the committee up and running as soon as possible, because like Gemma said, that there are tests that have a target for the end of the year. We are running out of time to meet that target, and we need to make sure that's delivered. So we need the committee up and running, we need the targets underpinned by legislation, and we need parliamentarians using this as an opportunity to call for an overall timeline.
So what can people listening at home do in all of this?
Yes, so what people can do and supporters can do, and is really valuable, is please keep on contacting your MPs. We have an action available on our website, which you can find out. And we've already, in just a few hours since the action's gone out, 531 out of the 650 MPs have already been contacted.
Amazing.
And sort of 38 of them have been contacted by more than five supporters. And some of them have been contacted by 8 or 9 of their supporters already. And this is only in hours by the time we were recording the podcast. So please keep up the pressure. It really makes a difference. Yeah. Keep contacting MPs. MPs are listening. I know it does feel like a bit of a struggle sometimes, but keep it up. Secure those meetings, or get in touch if you do have meetings. We're always happy to help with briefing materials. And thank you for all your support.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for today. We are absolutely going to we're going to keep talking about this on the podcast and unpicking it more, and there's going to be a lot more to say about it. But for a little intro, and a bit of breaking news analysis, that's all we've got time for. Normal service is going to be resumed next week. We're going to be talking to Dr. Ethan Perkins of the University of Bradford, who's researching a new human model of prostate cancer without using any animals. So we look forward to hearing from him. But before we go, Gemma, this week's poll question, what have we got for people?
The question is, do you think the government's strategy on phasing out animal testing faster goes far and fast enough? Yes or no? So you can vote on X, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and we'll discuss the results in the next episode. But if you'd like to get in touch and tell us your thoughts about the strategy or anything else from the episode, please do drop us an email at hello@animalfreeresearchuk.org.
And one more time on that question, Gemma?
Yeah, it's, do you think the government's strategy on phasing out animal testing faster goes far and fast enough? Yes or no?
Well, thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us and giving us all the latest on the scoop from the government's strategy, which just was only published yesterday at the time of recording. Thanks, Gemma, for all of your insights as well. Thank you for listening at home, and we'll be back in a week with our next episode.